How do you propose to ensure equitable distribution of resources throughout the county?
The first thing is, again, when I talk about collaboration, that also requires us to work with the other board members and being able to identify and prioritize what needs to be funded first. And that also includes understanding the funding that is available and designing and identifying ways to be able to I'm not trying to choose my words lightly, but we want to make sure that we're not making what I call decisions like immediately, where we're not taking the time to address those critical issues where funding can be applied and where it's lacking. So it requires us to understand number one, we need to understand the capabilities of our current workforce so we can understand whether or not funding needs to be available for training. We also need to understand our technology infrastructure. Do we have something in place where we can recycle old equipment out and have something in instead of having gaps between the life cycle of our equipment and software? We also have to understand whether or not that the equipment is able to interface what we currently have right now. And so that does require a critical look at what our current inventory is, what is the age, or whether or not the equipment and software has aged out, whether or not it will require us to have staff that are trained and be able to put that into the budget. And that requires a critical look across all platforms when it comes to the funding source.
Again, I would say that's where the community involvement. We need the community to make sure that we address those issues as it relates to equity. And if they should leave it up to the board members. They should make sure that if school A needs qualified teachers, then they should hold our feet to the fire to get qualified teachers for that school, because that's the equity that's missing out of that school. But school B may need, instead of a new gym, the priority should be teachers that have some type of cultural background to identify with the children that they are trying to help. It's hard to help children if you don't understand who they are and where they're coming from. Sometimes we put people in the school system, not bad people, but they just don't understand the children that they have in front of them. And it's hard to help someone if you don't understand who they are, what their needs are. And we help people, a lot of times we help people by having a meeting with each other and say, this is what these people need and this is what those people need, but none of those people are at the table to tell us what they need. And sometimes we exclude them. You can't help people by in excluding them at the table. And I think that's what we need to do a little bit better with that.
Well, one of the things that we need to do is we have to first and foremost know our areas. See, a lot of times we think that we know what our students need, but unless you survey the area, you need to talk to parents, you need to talk to educators that service those students to know what they really need in that area. And I think a lot of times too that people get that equality and equity mixed up, and they think as if you have to give the same exact resources across the board. But what's happening is you give the same exact resources across the board, then it ends up where there's a closet full of things that one area didn't need that's just sitting there and it's money wasted, versus going to our individual districts, surveying these areas, finding out what they need, and actually bringing what they need to their district. And I promise you it would end up where we look at our funds and see that the money that we wasted before really could have been good use to making sure that we get the resources that were necessary that's going to be beneficial to get this group of students where they need to be. So we have to know who we're servicing in this school system. And if every one of the board members does the work to make sure that they learn their area and we bring that information to the table, then when we make decisions about how money is being dispersed to our areas all over this district, then we better know, okay, so getting this type of resource is not going to be beneficial for District 4. So it doesn't make sense to spend the money in that manner over here in my district. But what I do need is access to technology. You know what I mean? So making sure that we know what they need, because that is the only way that we're going to get equitable. We don't want these same exact resources all the time, but we want resources that are going to be beneficial to get our students in our individual areas where they need to be.